G'day, Nurgle Rot and followers of the Garden. It's the coach here, and we are talking all things Maggotkin of Nurgle, specifically the new book. Now, I published a video recently talking a bit about some of the changes, and boy, oh boy, are you a passionate lot. Do you have some thoughts? And it's been interesting to kind of see, and I'm going to introduce my guest in a second, but the reason that we're doing this video first is normally I wait for the FAQs. Normally I want to see what the real landscape looks like with Nurgle and all the new tomes. But there's been such a backlash with this book. A lot of people reading it just thinking, this army is trash. I'm going to put it on the shelf. I'm going to never put these particular models on the table ever again. Some crazy backlash. But I found a gentleman. I found Alex Tubb, who has been playing lots and lots and lots of games, something like 10 games already, despite the book literally just hitting the shelf. So I want to get into Alex's head and get his experience to understand, now that the dust is settled, how are you finding the book? What do we like? What don't we like? Is some of the backlash legitimate? Is some of it just some like initial buyer's remorse? And then when you actually put it on the table, it's actually not so bad, or actually there's some unlocked gems. But that's kind of the introduction to the show. I'm here with Tubb/Alex. G'day, mate. Thanks for joining us all the way from the UK.
So we're good. Good to be here, man.
My big, long-ass introduction. You're like, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you nailed it.
Well, look, like, what's your initial thoughts on this book? Because, like, when I did two previews, right? So first off, I'm not a Nurgle player. I play Tzeentch. That's like the only Chaos faction. Like I really like Slaanesh, but I have no in-game experience other than playing against my opponents. And I've always enjoyed playing against Nurgle. It's always been a fun, interesting grind. And to be brutally honest with you, I've been playing against Nurgle for a long time now. And one of the things that really used to be my bugbear was that Nurgle was a slow army. And all of a sudden in Age of Sigmar, it became the fastest man alive. It became Usain Bolt of Age of Sigmar. And it never felt right to me. And you got your first edition tome, and then you got updated with a third edition tome. What was your initial reaction looking at this book? And how has that changed since actually playing with it on the table?
Yeah, it's different, I'll say. Like, super different from the first book, which is where a lot of the confusion is coming from. I like reading it. I thought, had a lot of play, like really, really interesting rules. But yeah, like it takes a minute to go from, oh, well, this is what Nurgle did, to like what it's doing now. So yeah, I was one of the hopeful ones when I first read it. I was like, yeah, this is a lot of play. Like, some of the points are probably a bit overcosted, but you can fix points. Like, rules are what you need. And then yeah, I've been putting in quite a few games over the last week or so, and yeah, it's awesome. Like, I think it can go toe to toe with almost anything in the meta. It's like it's only the third 3.0 book we've seen, so it is going to be a shock to the system, just as Stormcast and books probably were. But as we get used to what this new normal for books are, we'll see. Yeah, it's a really good book.
And I think the interesting thing as well, and I tried to put this context in my videos at the start, and I was saying that you're coming from a first edition book into third edition. So there was a lot, and I think I mentioned it in the videos, that the way that Age of Sigmar was designed and created and played in first edition was very different to the way we play today. Simple little things like Holy Within is just one of many examples. You had an industrial amount of rerolls. There was a lot of, a whole bunch of different things that were kind of removed. And then I didn't mind the book. I thought it was a good book. And then the minute that everyone saw the point, it seemed like that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. You're like, look, I can handle the rule changes, but these points means that I've got less war dollies on the table. I'm not happy. My Glocken has literally doubled in points. My Great Unclean One is, unplayable. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, like, I think things are maybe a little overpointed, like at the odd place, but by and large, like, yes, you're going to have less models on the table, but your models are doing way, way more. It's kind of easy for me because I didn't actually play Nurgle in the last book. I played against it a lot, but I picked it up with with third edition. And so playing against it, I was always like, oh, it's really annoying that, they can fly across the board turn 1, and Blades of Putrefaction's a silly spell, like it just can win you a game with a single dice roll. So like I can understand people being like, oh, like I really miss that stuff, because that's what they knew and loved. And so it's always going to take time to understand and get over that and be like, right, well, what can I do with this new book? And the answer is loads.
But and I think that's what I've been trying to say to the Discord members as well. Like, we've got a really passionate, wonderful Discord, and the Nurgle players have been off the charts, trying to build lists. And I know there's been a lot of frustration in their list building. And while I'm not trying to be positive, I'm not trying to be negative, I'm not saying this is a bad book. I think, the way forward is to look at this constructively. Don't look at what you've lost. Really look at this with fresh eyes and go, how do I make the most with my new rules? Because if you try to port over your 2,000 point list, let's say you played an event literally a month ago, your list will not be legal anymore. It'll be just way too many points. It won't work the way it used to. And that's frustrating. That's disappointing, and it's annoying. So, for me, it's looking at my collection of models, looking at these new sets of rules. And really the purpose of today's show is to try to be a little bit more constructive to say, what are the good stuff? If I was thinking about these types of things, how would I build around it? And now that you've got it on the table, how do I make the most of it based on your experience? Because I think a lot of people as well, when they looked at the disease tokens, they felt it overwhelming because they're like, well, we don't do nearly as much damage. How on earth do I defeat a Mega Gargant? Chip mortal wounds from the disease tokens are not gonna be win me the game.
Yeah, like there's not been, to my knowledge, there's not been as big a difference between one book and a new book, like in terms of the playstyle. Like the first edition book was, fast. It was a big old DPS check. It was super grindy. This new book is playing in all the phases, doing all kinds of weird things. Like disease tokens is like a classic example. Like you're constantly, like adding that chip damage to your opponent. I found, when I first read disease, I was like, oh, like that's really put me off. Like it's, it's adding time to the game. It's not really doing anything. And then you start playing and you're doing like, like, I don't know, 10, 12 mortal wounds every turn. Like over a game, that's, 100 mortal wounds.
Just through chip, that's just through chip disease alone.
Just from, standing near your opponent and occasionally getting a 6 to hit. So that's the kind of thing we're talking about. And, it's like the Wheel of Contagion. It's like in the previous book, you could manipulate it and do all this kind of stuff with it. And now, other than one command trait, what you roll, you get. But all that actually means is that from turn 1, you're like, right, this is how I'm going to play the game, because I know in turn 1 I've got this, turn 2 I've got this. And it just means you've got to be adaptable. There's no kind of cookie cutter. Like Nurgle 1.0 was, this is how I play. I run up the board, I sit on the objectives, and I beat you up, and can you deal with it? Whereas new Nurgle book is, right, like this is, what like scenario I'm in, this is how I'm going to do it.
Yeah, it definitely feels more tactically focused. I think, in majority of the time, like in 99% of my games against Nurgle, you would almost become the one-trick pony that Deepkin was that you put, until third edition, you put the Feculent Narmor in the middle. You would then run up the board and you would slingshot with your best unit. You would buff them up in some capacity, whether you're doing a Blight King build, a Demon build, a Thricefall build, you'd then pin them up in the board. You'd use your contagion points to summon a couple of MSU units, especially in the backfield towards the end of the game. Like it was very, very, very one-dimensional. And, the fact that you could manipulate the wheel whenever you wanted to did feel like one particular play style. And I think I made the comment in one of the discussions, and I mentioned that it felt a lot more like the Cruel Boys. Not to say that you are the Cruel Boys, but the Cruel Boys is very tactical. It is very counterplay. It is very tricksy in what you do, and there is no one way to play. I mean, right now, obviously, you could just like use your big shooters to shoot everyone, but it was designed in a way that you would have some flexibility through the different rules.
Yeah, that was my initial thought as well. Was like, like this is super, super close to like Cruel Boys in terms of the different tricks, and actually Nurgle is utilizing it because, as you said, unfortunately, kind of for Cruel Boys, they're pigeonholed into that, whereas Nurgle, you're encouraged to use every trick that you've got at your disposal.
Yeah, I think you made a comment before we started. And also shout out to Tyler. Thank you for the donation. And Tubb is an absolute legend. It's a pleasure to have him. Probably too long. He should have been on this channel a lot earlier. Absolute legend in the community. But I think you were mentioning before we got onto the stream, you were saying that, you know, for anyone who is into Magic, or you've heard, you know, Vince from Warhammer Weekly talk about, you know, Timmy, Jimmy, and Spike, these, you know, these profiles. I was going to say psychographic profiles of players. You know, a Timmy is someone who just loves big monsters and run forward and just fight and lol. You know, you've got the Spike, which is a more counterplay, and Magic players know these kind of profiles better. But it's not like where Daughters of Cain or Soulblight or Stormcast had some small changes, but the playstyle is still the playstyle. The Nurgle book has really changed the way you play. Like, you've really got to think about the way that you play and tactically build, because it's not about the run and charge. You just can't do it anymore. You just can't do what you used to do. And I think that's part of the frustration. And to the, I want to just call out really quickly, through this change, there's a lot of really cool things that have popped up. And I know Grievous Bodily mentioned that, you know, Maggoth Lords need to be imported into Australia and New Zealand. And people have been begging for Maggoth Lords to be really good for a long time. I think I might have seen one Maggoth Lord on the table in my whole 6-year journey of Age of Sigmar. Now is the time.
Yeah, I've never played against one. I don't think I even really knew they were a thing. Like, I just like, you just never saw them, and now everyone knows they're great. They're really, really good.
Even like people talking about Plusgoyles now. I'm not talking about plague drones, but the Plusgoyles are all of a sudden, you know, a hot commodity.
Plague drones are good. Even plague drones, like. Yeah, like, they've got to play. That shooting attack, which basically you count number of models close to them, and then caps out at 7. So, like, 3 plague drones can do 21 attacks at 3s and 3s with shooting. It's like, nice. But also, like, the Glottkin. Like, the Glottkin was semi-playable. Like, if you really wanted to, you could play him in the last book, and now he's super playable. Yeah, it's kind of the same throughout. Like, other than a few of maybe like the named heroes and stuff like that, everything is very, very good.
But in saying that, like, I saw a comment earlier mentioning, you know, they can't run a Glocken and a Lord of a Great Unclean One, Lord of Change. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at the comment talking about someone in the Lord of Afflictions, like, bloody too many. Yeah, but I think that's the list construction part that I think once people kind of get over and go, right, got 2,000 points, look at the list, what can I do? And look, we've kind of given like the overview summary. I don't want this to be a whinge fest. Look, I can appreciate why you'd be frustrated, Nurgle players, if you are frustrated, but I want you to enjoy your hobby, and I want you to do the best you can with what you've got, which is why we're doing this show. And I really want to get Alex's experience for the last 10 games and even more that he's thinking about it. Now that he's got on the table, what is it that he loves? And by the way, like, I know Tyler Buckets is in the chat here. He is absolutely, you know, they have that old saying, one man trash is another man's treasure. I know a lot of people are upset with like the Great Unclean One. Legion of the First Prince players are absolutely loving the Great Unclean One. It's like the greatest War Scroll update for them because of the damage they can do through the Nurglings and some sneaky abilities in Legions.
Yeah, the Great Unclean One's looking ridiculous. If he doesn't get the FAQ, oh baby.
All right. Well, I might actually get into some of the rules, and I'd love to maybe kind of get your thoughts and you know, let's talk through how you're thinking about it, because people who listen to my video and they probably listen to Facehammer and all the other different reviews, they've heard their thoughts. But when you looked at your allegiance abilities and you got, you know, your 6 different legions, your sub factions that you never had access to other than the ones that were introduced much later through the Wrath of the Everchosen, you've got your coalition forces. I'm honest, I'm surprised that you don't get the Maggotkin keyword for your coalition, but I can see why they wouldn't do that. But just disappointed that you didn't have the same Cities of Sigmar treatment that because cities gets the keyword, right? You get the keyword of the sub-faction and the allegiance.
Yeah.
You also got your disgusting resilience, your 5+ plus your heal. You got your disease points. You got your disease weapons, and then you got the boost to the healing through a bunch of keywords. Mm-hmm. So let's take it from the top. Thoughts on the sub factions? Where do you stand? What are your thoughts? Do you like them?
Probably my least favorite part of the book. Like the rules are fairly weak, which I'm actually okay with. Like they're universally weak, like other than maybe drowned men. I think my problem with them is that they're really encouraging spamming a particular unit. They're very, very restrictive. Drowned men has to be plague drones or blight lords. Munificent Wanderers has to be plague bearers to get any benefit. And we're in the particular problem with AOS 3 at the moment is that spam units is very, very common, and it competitively it's not great. Thankfully, I feel with the Nurgle book that actually you don't like spamming a particular unit isn't the best way to play it. But yeah, it's really very restrictive, which I'm not keen on. But like in terms of what's good, drowned men are very good. 8-inch pre-game move for your plague drones is great. 16-inch first turn move, cool. Munificent Wanderers is okay. But yeah, mostly it's just fine. It's not, it's a little added extra that you're not that bothered about.
What about one that I've been really curious about is the Filth Bringers. Now, I don't know if I'm putting too much weight in the Filth Bringers, but one of the reasons I like the Filth Bringers is it gives you the Rot Covens, which is that new unit that is only available in the Filth Bringers, which is the 3 Rotbringer sorcerers that you can get up to a +3 to cast on a single dice roll per phase. So if there's 2 next to each other or 3 next to each other, one of the 3 can get like a +2 or +3 depending on who's around. But do you think there's some play in there, given that I've never felt Nurgle's magic has been dominant, and it's always been things like the Great Unclean One cutting itself to get its little boost to get a bit more reliability in its magic. Do you think there's some play there with the Filth Bringers, especially with the Rot Coven?
Yeah, I think there is. It's definitely going to be it's definitely one of the least obvious builds in the Nurgle book. Like I've spent some time thinking about it, but like it's going to take some real like testing to see what works. Because as well as the +3, you've got somebody like Epidemius who can give them a reroll, so you've got +3 rerolling casts. You're definitely taking some endless spells in that list, but like, is it a trap? +3 to cast when there's still so much in the game that can shut it down. But as I said, actually, like, I think it's more my issue would be paying 360 points for the Rock Coven?
Yeah, it's 360 for 3 wizards.
Yeah, I think my issue is more actually paying for that might be a trap rather than the actual ability being bad. Like when you can get a Maggoth Lord for that, who every game is going to be worth their points. Meanwhile, you come up against a shooting army, then they're just going to get sniped off the board, or you go up against a magic dominant army and they're going to just get shut down, or you come up against something to say like lots of monsters where the spells don't necessarily work as well. So that's my issue, I think, is the points in an already expensive book.
And I think that's, you're right. You're right there. I really like it, but you are comparing it against the Maggoth Lord and a lot of, especially the mortals, where you might want to bring in the Rot Coven. You're likely to be putting in a Glottkin, which is taking up 700 odd points. It's one third of your cost is going to one model. Do you have the points to then add like a Rot Coven? Probably not. I will say, Luke Shaw in the chat, good call out as well. The Droning Guard as well. If you're going to take plague drones, the -1 to hit in the first battle round, as well as when they're set up, is a nice little ability too. I'm probably not drawn to the plague drones, but if you were going to go a demon build, if you were going to do that, I actually don't mind that. It's a nice little rule.
Yeah, 100%. Especially when they're set up. So if you bring a Lord of Afflictions, drop them down in your opponent's face, and first turn -1 to hit. Yeah, it's nice.
Chris in the chat has just asked, does a rot coven count as one model or three models when putting it into a battalion? I would say it counts as three. It reminds me of the Gobbapalooza, where you pick the Gobbapalooza is 5 models, but you must buy them as a group. There was a battalion that allowed you to do like one drop them, but they are 3 models. No different to like Morathi. You buy them as a package, but you get a big and a small.
So sorry, it is different to Morathi, which is the confusion. So on the Daughters of Cain points list, basically both the Shadow Queen and Baby Morathi are listed as leaders, whereas these guys are all just listed as one leader. So that's where the confusion is.
But I would still say that they are, because they're listed as 3 different models. You got a unit size of 111, but packaged as 360. I guess what I'm trying to share the example is because it's 3 models.
Mm-hmm.
I see them as three sub commanders, until GW updates in the FAQ to say otherwise.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree, but I think it needs an FAQ. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. I can appreciate that. I can appreciate why some people would, but I would say it counts as 3 models for the purpose of battalions and for drops. Because they don't have to be together. That's the whole thing, right? They can walk around. It's just if they happen to be with each other, they get the boost. But they're not forced to be with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With your coalition units, do you and look, obviously we can go into the weeds, and at the end of the show or towards like the middle at least, we're going to go through one of Alex's lists and put this into theory. But I thought it'd be really valuable to hear from an experienced Nurgle player, not just all us little content creators who 90% of us don't play Nurgle and like we're just like making the most of what we've got. I thought it'd be really valuable to hear from actually someone who plays with Nurgle. With your coalition units, what are your thoughts, given that they aren't like Cities of Sigmar, where they don't get the Maggotkin of Nurgle keyword, they don't get the sub-faction, so they're not going to get Blessed Sons or Drowning Men or whatever it might be. Is there anything in particular, or do you consider the allies, given that you've got point challenges already?
At the moment, no. Is the honest answer. Like I've heard some people say, "Oh, you could take a Plague Claw catapult, who can then hold it within your territory, getting you contagion points." And but no is the honest answer. What I will say though, as much as people are really going in hard against this, is that on these first 3 AOS 3 books, the War Scrolls have been really strong, while the Allegiance ability has been weak. So when it comes around to say Slaves getting a new book or Skaven getting a new book, if these War Scrolls are really strong, then suddenly actually maybe there's going to be reason to take Coalition. But right now, no, not really.
If it was keyworded, and hopefully, or maybe they revisit this later, or even a sub-faction that allows you to do Coalition, if it was if it allowed you to give them the Maggotkin keyword and they can give off disease, I would love the world of getting like a Plague Claw catapult, potentially to do some early damage and early disease points, especially in the backfield early. And then obviously there's some really good units in Slaves, but that world doesn't exist.
But then we have the issue of Archaon with a 5-up, disgustingly resilient save, healing an extra D3 a turn. It's like, where do you draw the line?
Like I said, I know why they didn't do it. I'm just talking about coalitions. If they had that, I would consider that. Look, if you're thinking of some cheap chaff and you want to block off the board with, some plague monks might be good, not to give away broken ranks, and given that your battle line are quite expensive. But yeah, I think to me, probably it would take a lot for me to find something from these. And if of any of them, it'd probably be through the Slaves of the Darkness right now, until those other 2 books got updated.
Yeah, for sure.
And by the way, Yes No made a good comment, and I've just looked at it on the pitch battle profile. It does say that with the Rotbringers, although the last line says, although taken as a set, each is a separate unit. So there you go. There you go. They take it as a set, but they are 3 individual models.
Yeah.
So that's the coalition stuff. Disgusting resilience, where our little heads are kind of blocking off. You get a 5-up ward across the board. So in the old book, you used to only get that for demon units, and it was on the War Scroll. Now it's a legions wide, and you heal a turn. Do you like it? Do you think it justifies the points increase? Has it changed the way you've looked at any particular units? And I know the Glottkin is one that, when you look at the Glottkin with a 5-up, healing 1 plus many other heals, you've got a super durable hero.
It's incredible. You can't overstate how good it is. Especially with mortal wounds apparently getting greater and greater in the game, having army-wide mortal wound protection, it's so good. I mean, the Amulet of Destiny is the prime example. It's a 5-up ward on one unit and it's completely broken. We've got a 5-up on everything. It explains some of the highly pointed aspects of it, and then you combine it with the Locus of Fecundity, the healing, potentially healing D3 a turn, and it's just these big units are just so hard to take down.
Yeah, especially your Great Unclean one. I mean, they're already tough to kill. The Glocken is the one that really stands out. Although Festus is a bit of a sneaky addition now. People are really liking, by the looks of it, people are loving Festus, but maybe dumping on Horticulus. Poor little Horticulus, his armor save going down. Seems like even though he gained two wounds, he's not as popular now. The old tree man.
It's so sad. He's my favorite guy. He just wants to run around planting trees. Let him do it.
Which I am 100% confident, folks. If you're listening to this, trees are not stacking. They're not multipliers. 1 equals 1. 1 does not equal 7 million, whatever gymnastics that people are trying to do. 1 is 1. And I'd be surprised if, and I think some people, there's some arguments out there to say that if I got 3 Freculent Narmals, that would be 9 contagion points. And I would be almost 100% confident to say that is not the intention, and that will be cleaned up very quickly. So don't set yourself up for disappointment in the future. Just play it as 1 tree equals 1 per turn.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and
unless Tubb has a different idea.
No, and it's like, I can see the argument, but it's absolutely the right thing. We don't need to be summoning that many wounds. It's just every turn it's just bad for the game.
How have you found your disease stuff? Because especially you don't have a lot of ways to deal disease early in turn 1. I feel like disease really kicks in kind of turn 2 to turn 3, depending on, again, you're slower, so you can't get into people's face turn 1, or it's a lot harder to get into people's face turn 1. You don't have a lot of range. So, there's some, I've seen some tricks people talking about using Umbral Spell Portal to start, dealing some damage early on in turn 1, but it's very hard. It's really a turn 2 kind of mechanic. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about how you've found disease now that you've got them on the table, and what are you finding is helping you rack it up, or any particular way to boost it up?
Yeah, so the list that I've mostly been running, I've not diseased has always been an added bonus. It's not something I've built into, but you definitely could. I've so far I think with Nurgle, if you're against an opponent who could put you down turn 1, turn 2, you're going to be in trouble because your chip damage hasn't had a chance really to build up. If I'm in the game turn 3, I'm pretty sure I'm going to win it, because they just once you start adding up that diseased and all the other little bits and bobs of damage you're doing, it's just everything starts to crumble for your opponent, and it can be an incredibly hitty army when the disease gets going. It's a bit annoying, having to constantly remember to I just rolled a 6 to hit, now I'm gonna have to go and do that counter and come back. So it is irritating, but it's very strong.
And you're obviously talking about the disease weapons there as well. So when you do the 6 to hit, whether it's missile or melee, it's an additional disease disease token, as well as the stuff that happens in the movement and the combat phase, and then any other spells. Is there any ways that you can remember all the different ways to kind of apply? Obviously, I said to people, just grab yourself a D8 token, get a whole bunch of D8s for your opponent, just so you can keep those counters. But how do you remember to apply diseases and the disease weapon stuff? Any tricks that you've found yet?
Not especially. I'm sort of, it's just very quickly at the end of the turn, popping around, and even it's just saying to your opponent, do you mind just chucking them adding 1 to the disease at the end of the movement phase, just while I crack on with some shooting. And generally they'll be happy to do that just to speed up the game a little. It's a bit of a faff, but once you're into it, it's fine, and it's strong enough to be worthwhile.
I think it's just the diseased weapons that you've got to really remember, because there's a lot of spells that allow you to add disease points or to bring that roll down towards the end. So that stuff happens at a particular time. And then at the movement phase or in the combat phase, it all happens at the same time. So I think it's just that constant reminder in combat and shooting. It's almost like you need a wristband instead of like, what would Jesus do, or whatever those, wristbands might be. It's like, did I give disease points?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just the chip damage. Like, I had one game where I think it was against like a rogue idol when they had like a couple of wounds left and it was on an objective, and I rolled 2 4-ups for the 2 disease points it had, and it died and it didn't get to take the objective off me. So yeah, it's just all those little things, and that's what Nurgle does really well. The little things, like we don't have any big flashy plays which are gonna stun the world, but it's just constantly just your opponents having to think like, oh god, like what's happening now? What's this gonna mean? And disease just adds to that.
Well, it goes back to the play style now. You have less models, but they are more durable. They heal. They have a really good they have really good wounds. Obviously, plague bearers went up. You're healing wounds as well. You can take a punch. Like you remind me of Homer Simpson. Maybe it's not the right analogy. I was going to say Homer Simpson when he became a boxer, and he just get punched in the face, and then until the opponent was exhausted, and then he just pushed them over, and it kind of feels like that. Like you're just constantly taking a beating. You're sitting there on the objective. You're denying people their battle tactics. You potentially, can maybe even deny them their grand strategy, depending on what they might choose or how you're building around the particular armies. But it feels to me that, you are a sucker for punishment. You enjoy it. And the disease points is just going to just chip them away slowly. But it's getting the chip damage on the right opponents and getting those key units kind of to die. That's kind of how I see this.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing, is like there's definitely an argument that the previous Nurgle book didn't play how you thought Nurgle maybe should, like in terms of the speed and all of that. Whereas this is exactly it. Like, yes, they're slow, but between auto running 6 and redeploy, like that makes up for most of it. But like you want to be in combat, you want to be in your opponent's face, you want to be absolutely grinding it out. My list, which we'll see shortly, is pretty low drop, and I normally take first turn because I want to get up the board, I want to get in my opponent's face, I want to take that hit, and get stuck in, and so it plays exactly how you feel a Nurgle army should, which is all we can really ask for a book.
Yeah, big love, Brent, as well. Brent, thank you so much for the donation. I'm not bringing up comments at the moment, only because it just comes up where our faces are, and it's a bit weird. But appreciate all the comments and the content, and all the Brent as well. That's a really great. Appreciate the donation. Look, we can go on forever. We kind of talked a little bit about sub-faction, so is there anything else you'd want to add to the sub-faction piece? We kind of already talked about it.
Yeah.
I would agree with you to say that it does reward you to spam. So if you are a drowned man, it does feel like that it's forcing you to build as many Blight Lords and the Lord of Affliction. By the way, just speaking of the Lord of Affliction, I didn't call this out, I probably should have, but I really like that for every one Lord of Affliction, I can add a single modeled Puscoil Blight Lord. So there's the same rule that the Storm Drake Guard, the Stormcast Dragons. So if you want to take a single model, it's not Battleline, but it does help you score some of the battle tactics. And just having one model for 110 points is, I really like that.
Yeah, 100%. Or just having something to switch off Unleash Hell or anything else. Yeah, I've used the single guy quite often, and it's really good.
It's really good. I really like it. And you've got your battle line. Has your battle line considerations changed? Plague Bearers and your Blight Kings have always been standard battle line, but now you've got your Beasts of Nurgle in your Befouling Host, you've got your Plague Drones in Drowning Guard, and then your Blight Lords either in Drowned Men or if you general as Lord of Afflictions.
Yeah, I mean, this is really where the book shines. Like, all the battle line is, absolutely worth considering. I know usually Blight Lords haven't been super well used, although actually at the start of third, they were getting used quite a lot for competitive Nurgle lists. Now they are 100% probably your best bet for Battleline. People are really hard on Blight Kings for their points, like their 250 points for 5. And again, it's one of those things, people started playing with them, people started using them, and like, oh, actually, they're really good. Like, they've got 5 attacks each, so they're going to absolutely be ramping up the disease points. They're, up 4 up, 5 up, chuck them in hunters or whatever, and they're, going to be on a 3 up, 5 up. You're never killing them. They've got options to deep strike to get around their slow movement. They're awesome. Same again with Plague Bearers. People were really down on Plague Bearers because obviously in the old book, they were -1, -2 to hit in big groups, ignoring Rend 1, bouncing back mortal wounds on, just everything. Whereas now this is a problem maybe with AOS books. They've gutted the rules and now they're just -1 to hit from shooting, but they're 2 wounds. And when they've got that 5 up ward, that means, and then you take, say, I think it's Fleshy Abundance with a +1 wound. A 300 point unit is essentially 90
wounds. Yeah.
90 wounds. Like, that's just, your opponent's like, well, I'm just never touching that. Like, what's the point?
It's funny because I actually made the comparison in my video, and I said, Demonettes are 110 points, they're 10 wounds, you got 150 points for 20 wounds, and they don't have the ability to do Flushy Abundance. But then someone corrected me and said, actually, they went up, and I'd forgotten. I was thinking of the Slaanesh demons when they come out with their new book in 2nd edition. They were 110 points, and they've actually got up to 140 points. So for extra 10 points, when you compare them to your Slaanesh counterparts, you're getting literally double the amount of wounds. And I think, hand on heart, everyone would prefer Plague Bearers over Demonettes. So, but I made a comment. I'd be curious to hear what you have to say. I made a comment to say that the Beast of Nurgle, if you were going to go Befouling Host, might be worth maybe having one of them as a battle line option because it's the cheapest battle line option you've got. Could be an okay objective holder. I know we're comparing that against like the Plague Bearers, but if you're crunched for points, the Beast of Nurgle might not be a bad option if you're a Befouling Host.
I think so. I will quite often summon them in my list, just as like a pinning piece, using the Glottkin. Don't spoiler alert, I love the Glottkin. Using just as a pinning piece to keep your opponent stuck in combat. And I think we might be surprised. Tom Maudsley, who's like a really, really good UK player, he's gone out and bought 10, 11 Beasts of Nurgle. Like, he's really hot on them, and if he's hot on them, then I'm going to believe that they're good. It's not something I've thought about loads, but yeah, they're just pinging around the board like pinballs.
I feel like they're definitely better than they were in the old book, but obviously to unlock the battle line, you'd have to be a Befouling Host. Mm-hmm. And if 1 tree equals 1 point and 2 trees still is 2 points, not 4 points, then Befouling Host, some people have argued that, getting 2 Feculent Narmors at the start isn't as valuable if it's not, 2 equals 4. But I actually also like the idea of Beasts of Nurgle not being battle line because it just makes that broken ranks even harder. At least if you've got a Beast of Nurgle and then, let's say, 2 units of Plague Bearers, then I've got an easy target to kill and score broken ranks from you. But if you've got one just as a pinball holding objective and it isn't a battle line, then there's very little to lose by dying.
Yeah, it's also worth mentioning with the double trees that with deleting objectives, if you've set your tree up so as you can summon onto one objective and your opponent obviously knows that, by the time in turn 3 that you're, say, summoning 10 Plague Bearers, your opponent's just going to delete that objective. And now, if your heroes are in combat, which they should be, so they can't summon, you're summoning your unit miles away from anything. If you've got double trees, then you've got that redundancy. So I don't think Befouling Host is, as bad as people think.
No, Joe McGill in the chat's mentioning Befouling Host with Horticulus, the Beast of Nurgle spam is where he's going to live. I love it. I love the idea. I would love to see a whole bunch of... And you know what? I want people to go back to the old... See, I'm from the old school, right? I'm from Warhammer Fantasy days where what Games Workshop would do is they would encourage you to kit bash and make some really messed up conversions using really bizarre parts. You'd have one arm from a marauder, the other arm from like a skaven, then you'd have like the tail of a lizard man, and some real messed up type of, like, give me some more of those types of beasts. Don't just give me like a whole bunch of them.
I'll just very quickly just touch on plague drones. I've already talked about their shooting attack. If you want to blow up a 10-man screen, easy. But also they count as 2 models each, so you've got 6 models on objectives, so your opponent can't just walk on to these objectives. They're still going to be a 5-up, 5-up, 15 wounds. It's 200 points. It's great.
The only thing I'd say as well is I think one of the other big reasons people are a bit down on the Blight Kings is because of coherency rules and just the range of weapons. And it's just going back to, back in the day, you'd run one block of like 15 Blight Kings, and then you'd have a couple of maybe a 10 and a couple of 5s, or 2 10s and a 5. Like you'd have, you just spam the Blight Kings on the table with big blocks of just unmovable. They sit in the middle and they just don't move. It feels like now when you're building around Blight Kings, you're really building around units of 5. I'm not seeing a lot of people talk about units of 10, and I think coherency and just, it's a big point sink going in with the 10.
I think probably the only unit I would reinforce in the book is Plague Bearers. I don't think I'd even reinforce Blight Lords. And that, as much as anything, there's less buffs, so you don't need like a big Death Star unit that you're going to chuck all your buffs on. And you've got like the healing, so like the more units you've got, the more healing you've got. So why not, go for more small units, have more utility, have more healing, and thus be tankier?
Yeah, that's my feel. My feel is I don't think right now is the time for Blight Kings to be in blocks of 10. And if you do, like, I'd love to hear the reason why you're doing it. I just feel like you're giving away too much. I'm better off having 2 units of 5 over 1 unit of 10, unless I want to play like the 1-drop game. But again, like, I'd rather be 2 drops and have 2 units of 5 than try to get myself in a 1-drop, just personally. With your enhancements, look, there's a lot of enhancements and things like that. Maybe, like, is there anything that maybe stands out for you, or should we just? I feel like we'd be forever with this one. There's some good stuff.
Maybe I'll talk about it when we have a quick look at my list at the end.
Cool.
They're my favorites on there. Yeah.
I thought I'd just bring up the rules from the slide decks just to make life a bit easier. But this is what I wanted to get to. I really wanted to get to, because the wheel was fundamental to the way that you used to play in the first book. And it has changed, and it's changed dramatically. As you can see here, I've kind of called out the key changes, and you can see all of the parts of the wheel has changed. What are your thoughts now of the wheel, and how do you think about it in your game? Is it like Disease, where like you're not building around the cycle, or?
Yeah, it really. The first thing I said, it really encourages good play. By that I mean, obviously, without the ability to manipulate it, other than one command trait, what you're given is what you've got. So all that means is, for me, 4 and 5, Plague of Misery and Nauseous Revulsion, those 2 turns one after another is brutal for your opponent. So if I roll a 3, I know that turns 2 and 3 are going to be like amazing for me. So I'm going to play pretty hard, get in my opponent's face and go. On the other hand, if I roll a 1 or a 2 where, I'm not getting there till a later game, maybe I'll play a little bit cagier. So yeah, like the abilities are really strong. If Plague of Misery gets changed to just full stop stopping Inspiring Presence, things get really scary. But yeah, some of them.
Why? Talk to me more about that.
So basically at the moment, unit leaders can still use Inspiring Presence as it's worded. If that gets fact, which I've kind of been hinted at that it might, then just turning off Inspiring Presence for a turn, especially when you've got so much chip damage and so much ability to spread your damage, could be really nasty. And from that, going straight into Nauseous Revulsion, stopping your opponent piling in. If you're against a combat army, they've just got nothing. So yeah, I think it's definitely like an added bonus. Sometimes, if I roll like a 2, it can be a little bit tough for me, or like a 1 or a 2. If I'm rolling that 3 or 4, like, life is good. Yeah.
Can I just pause you on number 5? I want to go back to number 5 because I think that is an underappreciated rule. But before we get to that, with the Plague of Misery, as it currently is worded, given that it's based on heroes, yeah, if I have a unit champion, I can still issue Inspiring Presence at the end. So that, and also Rally as well. So that kind of sucks because it's, a lot of units these days do have that unit champion that can, issue Inspiring Presence, and there's nothing you could do to stop it because even like a monstrous action of Raw only is for the combat phase, so it still allows them to issue a command in the battle shock phase. So as it's currently worded, it's you can still do it from a unit champion, but I wouldn't actually mind that to be clarified and updated. So I'd be okay with that.
Yeah.
But talk to me more about this. I think it's the second part, right? It's the enemy units that do not have the Nurgle keyword cannot finish a pile-in closer to a friendly Nurgle unit than they were at the start of the move. So unpack this for me, because I think people would just read that and go, cool, like, great. Like, what does that mean to you? How do you think about it? Where has it become powerful?
Yeah, so it has like so many uses. So like, firstly, if we're talking about a big block of infantry, so say there's a 20 block of infantry, all I'm going to do is take one of my cheap units and I'm going to charge onto the very corner model of that unit, and they're not going to be able to pile in towards me. So on their turn, they're getting 1 or 2 models fighting into there. They can retreat, but in that case, that unit, it's done nothing that turn, amazing. Or they can just stand there in combat, and either way, that unit has basically just been made entirely redundant. Against bigger monsters, if I'm able to charge a nearby less scary unit and then pile in the combat phase to like 2.9 inches away from that unit, unless they've got 3-inch reach, now that monster is stuck in combat, unable to fight, unable to do anything but retreat. It's just in this time at the moment where there's so many big scary monsters around, like monster units around, just being able to trap them in combat and have them do nothing for a turn is huge.
So when I think about this rule, I'm thinking about pinning a unit, and obviously when it comes to the time of the revulsion, I don't want to be in base-to-base contact with my opponent. I want to be within 3 inches. So I want to start within 3 inches. And the way I'm looking at this is I'm going to limit the amount of damage coming back to me because, 1, my opponent can't pile in, but 2, if they only have a 1-inch weapon, there's really a fine amount of damage going to go into me. But if they have a 2 or a 3, I'm starting to block that off. So and you can be cheeky as well, right? If your unit is already in combat, and then you can kind of move around and pin a unit and within 3 inches in preparation for the revulsion, then all of a sudden you've pinned them, you've kept within 3, but you don't have many units that are actually within base to base. I think for me, that's kind of where it becomes valuable, especially with a lot of like 1-inch and 2-inch weapons. They seem to be pulling back a little bit on the 3-inch weapons these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if I know that turn 5 is next turn, or even this turn, it's amazing double turn. Like, double turn is obviously something people struggle with. It's amazing double turn protection because you know that on the first turn, your opponent's getting very little use of their turn, so then they get the double, and while they can do a bit with it, you've got it out the way, and now you're threatening to double them back. It just really encourages good smart play, which is kind of a theme with this book. Is it really makes you think, and if you make a bad decision, it'll probably hurt you, although you're tanky enough to get away with bad decisions, but you make a good decision and you just win.
I could see situations where you block somebody off. When this time comes in, you could block somebody off getting onto an objective and piling in onto an objective and scoring it from you, which I think is a big one. I can also see this coming in at a really bad time for someone where if this starts to come in, let's say late game, and your opponent has burnt through a bunch of battle tactics and they've got like broken ranks or slayed the warlord, there's some very combat orientated battle tactic that your opponent has to use because they've burnt through some of the good ones. All of a sudden, you've just made their life a whole lot harder. So I can see some really good tactical play with some of this stuff.
But again, that also, like, don't underestimate the -1 to charge rolls. You know, like, how often do you make a charge by like 0.1, 0.2? Even if they make the charge, you know, but they only just make it because of that -1, and then they can't pile in. It's like, yeah, like they might as well just not have charged.
Well, you could redeploy, and then the -1 to the charge as well, and all of a sudden, yeah, you've either forced them to maybe use a CP to re-roll it, or they fail the charge altogether. So again, this kind of comes back to what we said earlier. It's becoming a very tactical book, not just a run forward and Nurgle goes boo.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I said. Like, your opponent will make a mistake at some point, and Nurgle capitalizes on it really heavily. You know, they're like, oh, I'm gonna like go and I'm gonna charge this thing, and they just forget, and then they charge, and you're like, oh, by the way, like, I did tell you at the start of the turn, but just remember you can't pile in. And they're like, oh no. Yeah.
I will say the burgeoning is I really wish Games Workshop didn't use contagion points and command points with the same acronym.
Yeah.
Like, why on earth are they both CP?
It's silly, but there we go. It's GW, isn't it?
Just use some other language. But yeah, I think the wheel is great. I'm really happy with the wheel. Really quickly, has summoning changed in your eyes? Are you now summoning less? Are you summoning more? Are you summoning different types of units?
Yeah. I've summoned. Yeah, like sometimes I'll summon a Sloppity or a Spoilpox early. Got a few. Quite often I'll summon, as I said, Beasts of Nurgle just as a quick objective grabbing pinning piece late game. And then, yeah, that magic number 14, just, you know, oh, here's 30 wounds onto an objective for you to deal with. Like, sure, you won't normally get it until turn 3, but turn 3, if you're getting that unit straight onto an objective, like, your opponent's only got half their army left, it's even harder for them to shift it.
Is there any reason why you would summon the heralds? Are you summoning an extra herald like Sloppity, or is this in replace of putting it in your list? So you just build around not having Sloppity, and then knowing that when you get enough contagion points, you bring the Sloppity into the list.
100%. I don't think there's really much reason for you in a demon build to pay the points for them. I think, yeah, you take a great unclean one with like the bell, for example, to get that, because all you generally need is one extra contagion point to be able to summon, and then, yeah, straight into your army, boom. So yeah, I quite like summoning a Sloppity into my lists. Like, normally it's turn 2 for me, but yeah, it's a really solid play.
So that's one of your key ones. Is there any other things that you would bring into your list? Are you summoning a great unclean one? Because one of those battle tactics that you've got is to summon a great unclean one. I feel like saving up your CP with the current wording and the current thoughts of Feculent Narmors is a trap. I feel like I would much rather add small units like your Plague Bearers, like Sloppity, like, you know, other things as you go, as opposed to this big bang towards the end.
Yeah, I mean, even if you build really heavily into it, you're probably not getting one till turn 5, in which case you make a 9-inch charge or he does nothing. Yeah, like, yeah, it's nothing. It's maybe in like bigger games, I don't know, but no.
You'd have to really build around getting as much contagion point. I think you've got to like heavily optimize your list to be a contagion point summoning monster. But I don't think the book allows you to do that easily. You know, it's like a turn 3, turn 4 type of great unclean one.
Yeah, and ultimately he doesn't really do late game. He doesn't do twice as much as 2 units of 2 units of Plague Bearers. It's like, yeah, just bring the wounds.
I forgot to mention this when we were talking about coalitions, and someone in the chat had mentioned and asked us the question. Actually, it was probably a good reminder. Would you bring in a coalition plague priest for its universal prayers? I think it's actually not a bad option. I think given there's very few people, I have a love-hate relationship with Curse, and there's not a lot of durable units and heroes that will really benefit from it. I think there's some examples, Khorne and Beast Claw Raiders have a couple of good options. I think the Plague Priest would actually be an okay ally. It's a fair point, and it gives you some priests, and you don't have access to priests naturally in this book.
Yeah, I agree. Like could be good. Although maybe I take it for the heal rather than for. But even then, you've got so much healing. It's just like disease points is basically half as good as curse. So it's limited like benefits compared to other armies which really need curse.
Yeah, it's a good option, especially if you want to tap into the priest, and knowing that your summoning isn't as strong by getting a prayer off. It's just you don't have a lot of natural abilities to and I think again the chat's mentioning earlier. Thank you, Flaming. Even like if you want to bring in the plague furnace as well, like there's a lot of cool, interesting combinations if you go into Skaven. I think it goes back to what you initially said though, just do you have the points and what are the sacrifices just because your units are currently quite expensive?
Yeah, exactly. Like maybe it's not the worst decision to do, but if we're talking about sort of fairly competitive Age of Sigmar, it's like no, there's no reason to.
Tree. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Are you just going to build one and not summon anymore? Do you have any thoughts around the Feculent Narmor? I think it's okay.
Yeah, it's not much. Like I think the most important thing is where you put it, because it's only summoning pretty close. I think it's summoning wholly within 7 of it.
The summoning changed. It used to be 12, and now it's down to 7.
Yeah, so like I've generally found I'm always summoning from my tree, just because my heroes are always in combat. So having that room to summon anything in, I really struggle with. So good placement of the tree is important, and that's where its use is. Other than that, it's, a whole load of nothing really.
Yeah, it's not a huge amount of stuff, and I think most Nurgle players used to take it just for the run and charge. Like let's be honest, like I could probably count on the amount of the amount of damage on my hand, how much mortal wounds you dealt with by being next to a tree, and like it was never that big, but there was always the run and charge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fair enough. Do you have any thoughts around the grand strategies and battle tactics? I feel like sometimes that they are building up for a world where maybe the next battle pack doesn't have generic grand strategies and battle tactics. And I say this because, or maybe they're building up to a world of 40k where everything is just going to be built within the battletome / codex, and future battle packs don't have a grand strategy and a battle tactic. Would you, going back to grand strategies, will you be taking one of these over what's currently available in Gurish Heartlands?
I don't think so. Like if you couldn't heal disease points, then spread rampant disease would be interesting. But all your opponent has to do is go first, or no, go second, turn 5, heal that disease point.
Yes,
and it's done.
And that's a big bet. If you're going into a tournament and you've got to put down the grand strategy for 5 games, and all it takes for an opponent to take round 5, go last, heal, deny you that battle tactic, that's crushing.
Yeah, especially when, like the Nurgle builds are either going to be monster heavy or your monsters are really hard to kill. It's going to be battle line heavy or your battle line really hard to kill. So you're just going to go for those ones. Or, if you went for like more magic based, or your wizards sat at the back. Like there's just the grand strategies in the book on this one. Sorry, in the General's Handbook are just better. There's probably some interesting battle tactics that you can get. I'm really bad. Basically, I disagree with the whole faction specific battle tactics things. So I've not actually looked into these massively. It's something I need to do. But I'm pretty sure there's a couple that are good from what I've been told.
I think some of them are all right. By the way, I think Corrupt Arcane Nexus might not be a bad grand strategy. If you are taking like a big centerpiece model, let's say the Glocken, and if you can get the Glocken in the middle of the board, and then kind of like, I almost like imagine this like the NFL, like, you've got your quarterback and then you defend your quarterback. If you can defend your quarterback and kind of block off that 6 inches from the center of the battlefield, then great, you score your grand strategy. But I guess the question I've got is what happens in those battle packs or battle plans where the objective is not in the middle? Do you want to have your Glocken, or do you want to be defending the center of the board and keeping those away from objectives? And I think the answer in most situations is no, I want them to be in the fight, not being pulled from the fight because I want to score my grand strategy and ultimately maybe even lose the game.
Yeah. Also, like, you know, game 5 of a tournament, you're tired, you have a really intense game, you're just going to forget. You're going to get to, I forget what my grand strategy is, and like, oh yeah, I need to keep my monsters alive. So like, yeah, having to like be in one place, you'll catch yourself turn 5 and be like, oh, I've lost it. Yeah.
I'd probably almost put a token down. I think I would, if I was going to play this,
Yeah.
I would put a token down, almost like a gravesite marker. Just like, look, here's a little dot. It's just like, I'm going to have to defend that. Obviously, then you're reminding your opponent throughout the entire game about your little point you need to kind of hold. But I could see you're right. Like, you get into the thick of it, you're in combat, you're battle shocked, you're moving around.
Mm-hmm.
You'll forget about that arcane nexus pretty quickly.
Yeah.
As someone in the chat's already mentioned, I don't want to have to think about my grand strategy most of the time. I think that's a really good point. Like, it should complement the way you play, not draw you from the mission and the play.
Reading through the battle tactics, I do like both Gifts of Nurgle and Glory to the Grandfather. I think they're both super attainable. Gifts of Nurgle probably more late game, there's a couple. I mean, Glory to the Grandfather is probably almost an auto get on some turns. You're just like, right, I'm going to go in, I'm going to smash. Yeah, cool.
I like feed the maggots, especially when you're playing a lot of like 1 wound units. So if you're able to do 7, kill 7 models in that turn with your disease, then happy days.
Yeah, it's definitely
certain matchups. Yeah, not all matchups, but definitely, I think it's definitely a good card to have up your sleeve. But then some of them are very specific to having a summon great unclean one or working with the rotfly mount. Some of the ones very, very specific to the feculent Narmaul as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And the droning is, if you are going to be building around, your plague drones, then the droning is going to be great for that one. But if you're not bringing that in and you're building around something completely else, then it's a useless tactic.
Yeah, especially with the Lord of Afflictions being able to drop in. It's definitely a possibility.
I'm sure this one's going to be a really quick one. Thoughts on the core battalions? You got your Thrice Fold for your triple Glade Unclean one / Rodigus, or you've got your Rotbring Assist, which is your very heavily focused mortal battalion. I'm not a fan of either of them competitively. I don't know. I feel underwhelmed with these two.
I think Rotbring Assist, if you're going mortal heavy, is good just because you can fit more units into it than a battle regiment. The problem is you're always taking one monster pretty much. So you're immediately going to be a 2-drop. And often that would then actually fit into a battle regiment. But for very specific builds, I could see the Rotbring Assist being good. But by and large, no, you're going battle regiment over it.
That was what I was going to say. Is I think if you're going to build, let's say, a lot of Black Kings, or you use the units within the Rotbring Assist, I think I'm probably going to be wanting to bring in a Glocken who's going to sit outside. So I think the Battle Reg is probably better.
Even the Maggoth Lords, like, you're always running one or two Maggoth Lords. Immediately, okay, I'm a 2-drop now.
Yeah, that's fair. And there's obviously a lot of other changes, and we'll talk about units in a second. And then I'm just going to quickly switch screens and I'll swap out and bring up your actual list. But like just talking this with you, I hope people are feeling a bit more optimistic. This is not a sales pitch, and I'm not trying to tell you your book is awesome. But I think it was a bit of an overreaction, and people were a little bit over. They were angry. And I can appreciate why you were angry. But I think now kind of the dust is settling. Talking to you, Alex, I'm hearing that it's not so bad. There is still really good stuff in the book, but I just need to think differently, and I need to look at my list differently. And ultimately, it's my play style. I think the way I play with my toys on the table has fundamentally changed.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. Well, here's the list. I've been teasing you with my little strip tease and talking. No, it's been important to talk about the rules before we get into the list. But here is your list. Here's the list, or at least a list. It's not the list. It's not everyone copy Alex's list and go run it at your next GT. And it is obviously as well pre-FAQ, so we don't know what's going to change. So if points change or rules change or understanding of certain rules change, obviously things might get added or removed. But what you've got is you've gone Blessed Sons with the Beastmaster Grand Strategy, and I just kept inspiring there because it wasn't in your list, but you're at 2K anyway, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Sure. So you've got Demon Spew, the Glottkin, and you've got Lord of Afflictions. You've got the spell on Rodigus, which is Rancid Visitations, and you've got the Lord of Afflictions, who's the general with overpowering stench, and the split horn helm. You've then gone 10 Plague Bearers, 2 Puskor Blight Lords, 2 Puskor Blight Lords, 3 Plague Drones in a battle reg. First observation that I want to talk about is this is a very mixed force. We talked a lot about spam before, and I imagine people are thinking, if I'm going to build around Plague Bearers, I'm going to do a lot of demon spam, and I wouldn't bring in the Glocken. Or if I'm going to go all mortals, I wouldn't bring in demons. I think some of the thinking is very like you're either one or the other. But you've gone both. You've gone a bit of a soup here. Talk to me a bit about your thinking and what you're trying to achieve with the list.
Yeah, so it's like whichever way you go, mortals or demons, they've kind of got their downfalls. Like demons are very tanky. They've got a lot of board presence, but they lack any punch. While mortals are going to inherently be very low model count. So basically, from the top, general, everyone's going to be taking who runs mortals. A Lord of Affliction is your general. He's awesome. 8 wounds on a 3-up, 5-up. In my case, it's a 3-up, 4-up because of the artifact, which just gives him a 4-up ward. That's immediately, one very hard to achieve battle tactic for my opponent, which is Slay the Warlord. Now you're like, okay, I've got to put a lot in to kill him. The command trait, Overpowering Stench, is probably one of the strongest things in the book. Basically, within 7 inches, units can't give out commands, and if they're and if they're wholly within 7, they can't receive commands.
They can't. Yeah.
Which basically just means it's like Raw, but it's guaranteed. So no, in a safe stacking meta, no all-out defense if you're close to my Lord of Afflictions. If he charges 30 Sentinels, they can't unleash hell on him. It's just Inspiring Presence. Suddenly they can't do. It's just it's so good, and it again plays into that. You're constantly messing with your opponent's head. They're like, oh, I'm gonna redeploy or unleash hell, and you're like, oh, no, you're not. Like, look where you are. Just
be careful of the wording. Like I found this one really interesting because Overwhelming Stench, right? The hero just has to be within 7, but the unit has to be wholly within 7. So if it's a large unit, I know we're not playing in a horde meta right now, but if you've got an opponent with a lot of large bases, or they've kind of strung out a little bit, this one could be a hard one. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But I do want to ask you though, just to really quickly, it's a good question to ask from the chat. Is what was the logic behind Blessed Sons? I think a few people in the chat immediately wondered why you wouldn't go. I think Drowning Men. Drowned Men.
Yeah, there's every chance. Like I've run Drowned Men. It's good. For me though, I'm almost always so far chucked the Lord of Afflictions in the sky with 1 unit of Blight Lords. So then I'm only getting 1 unit with a pre-game move. So it's kind of like, wow, I might as well try and just get a little bit more mortals. And it is annoying, rolling all those dice and not rolling any 6s, and you're like, oh, I didn't get any mortal wounds. So I might well change this list back to do Drowned Men in the future. But for me, it was about making the Glottkin. This whole list is about making the Glottkin as good as possible. And so, he dies, you roll 20 dice, you do a few mortal wounds. But yeah, it's okay.
Is this a 1-drop, by the way? Or
I think 2-drop.
I messed up the template. I didn't actually. I meant to ask you how many drops. The list you gave me didn't have it, but
it's 2 drops. Orgots isn't in the battle regiment, but everything else sits in it. Then I think Orgots and the Glottkin. If you're running the Glottkin, I think you want to always take Orgots, mostly for his free command every turn. because I'm always using Blightcreek, which is the Glottkin's command ability. I'm super CP hungry, so that's where that comes in. Yeah, Glottkin, he's 700 points. Lots of people hate him at 700 points. I think he's broken still.
Just let's sit on Glocken because by the way, I love the split horn helm. I think giving your general a 4-up ward is just beautiful. The fact that you're healing as well really keeps that Lord of Affliction around for a long time. But talk to me about the Glottkin because it is a big investment. It's 300. Sorry, it's 1/3 of your list. 300. Yeah. It's 1/3 of your list, and it's a big boy, right? But you lost some of the abilities. You gained some abilities. You've gained obviously the War Master rule, so you can issue commands at a much further kind of range. Mm-hmm. You got more wounds. I think you went up with wounds, but more importantly, gained the 5-up ward with the heal 1 wound a turn. Mm-hmm. Have people killed your Glocken? What have you learnt so far with your Glocken?
So the only thing that's killed it so far is a Wargog Prophet. Those things are broken. Just so many. Like one, you did like 30 mortal wounds. It's like okay.
Poor old Bone Splitters have got literally nothing other than spamming the Wargog Prophet, but they've got a one-trick pony. But and they can just do like an industrial amount of mortal wounds if the dice roll is lucky.
Yeah, but yeah, like he's 20 wounds, 4-up, 5-up. So if you're going to kill him, you've really got to try to kill him. And often opponents just won't bother. He's pretty good in combat. He's got, I think, 7 attacks at 3s and 2s, -2, 3 damage. So if he goes in, I'll always give him +1 to hit. So at 2s and 2s, he's doing sort of 15, 20 damage. And then he's also got a really nice monstrous rampage, which is.
I was going to ask you about that. I was going to ask you, do you do that over Roar or Stomp?
I tend to. Usually because I run the Lord of Afflictions very close to him. So the Lord of Afflictions is kind of roaring my opponent anyway. At which point, he's just doing, going in and doing 5 mortal wounds, which I can charge a little hero. Bam, the hero's dead. It's like, cool. I don't have to worry about now splitting my attacks and being like, oh, how much do I need to kill this little hero? It's done. He's also got, it's a bit of a weird rule. Start of the movement phase, you've got to roll higher than their bravery. I think it's bravery.
Oh, is this horrific? Horrific.
Yeah.
At the start of the enemy movement phase, you roll 2d6 for each enemy unit that's within 3 inches of the unit. So he's on a massive base, so it could be a couple of units. If the roll is equal to or greater than the unit's bravery characteristic, they must retreat or suffer d6.
Yeah,
mortal wounds.
And normally your opponent's going to take the d6 mortal wounds, especially with the thing we'll talk about in a minute. But again, it's just adding to that mortal wounds. Now he's doing 5 plus d6 mortal wounds in a turn before you take into account disease and everything else that he's doing. But the reason you take him is Blightcreek. His command ability is end of your opponent's movement phase. He and another unit wholly within 18 inches of him get to charge. And the important
as long as the unit is within 12 inches of the enemy.
Absolutely, but the important distinction is that he can be in combat and still give out that command because it says can charge, not must charge. So he can be in combat and can still get another unit to do that cheeky play.
Or if the Glocken was sitting on an objective, but you just want a slingshot or counterplay, your Glocken can stay there, but you sling. What are the types of units that you would like to use this ability on? Because it is keyworded Maggokin of Nurgle, so literally anything in the army could be countercharging.
I've done it with everything in the list. I mostly use it to deny battle tactics. Like my opponent go like, oh, okay, I'm going to conquer. You've got, 2 Blight Lords set on there. I'm going to charge this big unit on, and we're going to take that objective off you. And I go, no, you're not. I charge out and pin you off. Or I've had it where they've gone, I'm going to go broken ranks on that really weakened Battleline unit, and then I countercharge with another unit, pinning that big scary unit. And that's the thing, is that your opponent for a while will be like, okay, no, he can do this thing, I must remember. But at some point they're going to forget. And at that point, that's going to be basically a 4-point swing in the game. Oh, no, sorry, 2-point swing in the game. And often in AOS 3, 2 points is probably all it needs to win a game.
One has mentioned a really good, I love this combination. Maybe it's more of a theory hammer, Alex, you tell me, that, being able to countercharge with a base of Nurglings or a beast of Nurgle, and it's almost like an arcane bolt. Like you got this, like just sling them up the board, pin them in, deny them from getting onto an objective or getting into that juicy target they wanted to go into, and you're throwing away, especially if they're not battle line, throwing away your Nurglings, throwing away a summoned beast of Nurgle, just to pin, and obviously knowing the durability, they just sit there and just take it.
This is exactly why I summon Beasts of Nurgle quite regularly, is because they synergize really well, especially when they retreat and charge. So you charge them in, they pin it, they then retreat, they charge somewhere else. Yeah, it's really good. It's also worth noting people are really down on the Glottkin because of his 4-inch movement. The way I get around this is Orgots gives him his free CP, so now he's going to move 10 inches on my first turn. We're going to run him, and then in my opponent's turn, he's going to charge. So basically, he's got a 10-inch move because he can always charge out of sequence. So yeah, it forces your opponent to think really hard, and at some point every game they're going to make a mistake. And if you're hopefully if you're a good player or you spot it, you'll be able to capitalize on it.
And you wouldn't be able to re-roll the charge roll because
no.
Yeah, because they've already received a command, but also re-roll charge is in the charge phase, so that would deny you.
Yeah, so unless you had the Triumph, I'm pretty sure Triumph you could do it at any point. Not that I've checked that. Also, a reason to take Horticulus is I'm pretty sure he gives Beasts of Nurgle reroll charges. So there is hope for little Horticulus. Yeah, what was I going to say?
Yeah, you can. Horticulus allows you to re-roll charge rolls for friendly Beasts of Nurgle if they're wholly within 14. So
it's worth comparing it to the Iron Sun's ability in Iron Jaws, which happens at the end of the opponent's charge phase. The fact that this happens in the movement phase, firstly, it switches off Unleash Hell. So again, you can charge shooting units without any threat. But also, like, for example, Fulminators right now, they're super scary. They're the hardest hitting unit in the meta. Well, now Fulminators can never charge you. So, cool. They're now damage 1 rather than damage 3. And, charge bonuses are quite common in the game. And you're just saying, nope, you can't have that.
Brad Pitt Lord has mentioned, and I don't think you can do this. So Brad Pitt Lord asking, can you do this in combination with redeploy? And the answer would be no, because your Glocken would be issuing the command, and then creating that bubble to receive. So you wouldn't be able to redeploy. You wouldn't be able to at the start of the movement phase do a redeploy and then go into no, actually.
No, because it's still all in the movement phase, so you wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, because it's happening in the movement phase. Because Unleash Hell is shooting is in the charge phase. Yeah, it wouldn't work. I'm thinking through the scenarios, and I can't think of any way that would work.
No, I don't think so.
Cool, but yeah, Glocken I think has got some good counterplay. The fact it's got 20 wounds, 5 up, healing 1. A lot of cool stuff you could possibly do with it. Elias in the chat mentioning the Blight King is unreliable, and you're right. I think to make it reliable, you'd need Horticulus if you were going to kind of sling through that. The Blight Kings, for example, lost their +1 to run and charge, so their musician, that would have given you a bit more reliability if you were going to slingshot them and countercharge your opponent. There's not a lot of those +1 to run and charges in, from what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I think that's where it comes down to unit selection. I'm always really aware that I can fail the charges and I won't get a reroll. So maybe a better unit would be 7 inches away, but if I got another unit which can do a similar job 5 or 4 inches away, I'll be like, yeah, I'll just go for that. Be sure I make the charge.
I think it ultimately depends on where exactly your units are in preparation for the counter charge. So if you're trying to slingshot something from 10 inches away, then yeah, absolutely it's unreliable. But if you're screening around and you've got some options, then within 3 or 4 or 5, like,
and it's all in the setup. You can absolutely bait your opponent into, you could send your battle line unit in, like absolutely prime for them to do Broken Ranks on it, but you'd also have the Glottkin lurking really nearby. They take the bait, they go for Broken Ranks, then the Glottkin goes in, and you deny that battle tactic. And then
that's a great one, actually. If someone has chosen like Broken Ranks, Slay the Warlord, some type of like kill your opponent, you've obviously got redeploy up your sleeve, and you've also got this. So
there's one battle tactic that the Glottkin can't interfere with, and that's Ferocious Advance. Because even Monstrous Takeover, all he has to do is charge onto that objective, and because a monster can't be on the objective, you deny it. And again, in a game where most good players will get 5 out of 5 battle tactics, if you can deny one, I've had games where the Glottkin's denied 2 at most so far, and I'm still figuring out how to play him. Yeah, it's a huge swing, especially when you play the objective game sitting on the objective so well.
Yeah, and I think that's the reality as well, folks, is that Age of Sigmar, especially now 3rd edition, it's not about, because you got to remember, like when I used to play tournaments in 1st and 2nd edition, it was never about objective play, and battle tactics were never as big as they were. Like the secondaries were like auxiliary objectives. They were like tiebreakers at best. So, it was all about, scoring your VPs and then your kill points. They were like your first win conditions. Now it's not about killing. It's certainly about scoring your battle tactics and your VPs, right? So for anyone who's worried about the damage dealing potential, it's okay. You can take it, and you can counter a whole bunch of things through your durability. So what I'm hearing is Glocken isn't as bad as people are thinking. Yes, sticker shock. It is 700 points. Big jump from the 300 that it was. But it is offering still a lot of value to you and worth the 700 odd points.
Yeah, I think if I'm being honest, maybe he should be 650. Like maybe he's a touch overpointed. And for some players, he probably won't work. They'll be like, I don't get it. But yeah, I think if you put a lot of time in with the Glocken, you could do some really good stuff with him. There's some really, really cool plays there.
I think the other thing I'll just mention before I go back into your list, Alex, is that I would rather a good war scroll with overcosted than a bad war scroll that's fairly costed, because once a war scroll's written that's hot garbage, you're in there for the long run. And there's a lot of units out there that have a rubbish war scroll that points just can't resolve alone. So all it takes 6 months time, a point adjustment, it's down to 650 or 600, and you forget the pain that you've gone through right now.
Yeah, exactly.
So you got your Lord of Afflictions, obviously, for your general, which is going to be unlocking your Blight Lords as Battleline, your Puscoils. Curious to know, why would you take Plague Drones? Is it just because you were 20 points over from bringing in a second lot, an extra lot, or what was some of the logic here in the unit, your unit choices?
So the other version I've run is the single Blight Lord with the spell portal. That's an option. But yeah, probably if I had 20 points, I'd be taking Blight Lords. But what I do, so firstly, the Plague Bearers, their job is to screen against the Alpha Strike if I'm against an Alpha Strike army. And then other than that, they're an objective sitter. But what I can do is I can pair them in the Plague Drones up. Turn 2, generally summon a Slopty. And now I've got quite a nice little independent blob that's sitting on an objective. It's only 350 of my points, and good luck moving that. Also, as I said, really good against cheap screens. Potentially that 3-man unit can just delete, kind of a unit of 3 guild guards, say, which is screening something juicier behind, ready for Orgots or the Glottkin to charge in and wreck face. So yeah, I really like them. I think they're really good, and used in that little package, they can do a lot of work.
Why would you not take a Demon Wizard to get yourself Fleshy Abundance with the Plague Bearers?
Because, I mean, it comes down to points, and what would I give up in return? And for me, the only Demon Wizard I think is worth the points is the Great Unclean one, in which case I'm not taking the Glottkin. So yeah, I think
the trade-off's too expensive for you in this particular build.
For me, I don't care about the Plague Bearers. They, as I said, they're there to die. Whether it's against the Alpha Strike or if I have to sit something at the back to farm contagion points or just sit on an objective. So yeah, this list, it's definitely more output than tankiness. I mean, I've had I had one game against Thunder Lizards where I essentially tabled the opponent by end of turn 2 just through mortal wounds and like got a little bit of luck. But yeah, the output's there in this book. You just have to look for it. So I don't need that tar pit because I'm getting up in my opponent's face super early.
So you're already getting great value from the 10 Plague Bearers, having 20 wounds already. That fleshy abundance you don't quite need because you've got other tank units. But if you weren't going in with some of these other options, it might be worthwhile. Because I think fleshy abundance is still incredible if you're going to take Plague Bearers. But if I'm going to do that, I'd probably want more than one unit of Plague Bearers. And obviously you can summon Plague Bearers, which is another option. But from what I'm hearing, the Demon Wizard, you definitely need something a bit stronger. I
was just saying, also being honest, there's still 30 wounds. If my opponent
20 wounds. 20 wounds.
Sorry, 20 wounds, but with a 5-up ward, it's 30 wounds.
Oh, yeah. Sorry,
yeah. So if my opponent's committing that much of their army to something that can delete it, then that means they're not hitting me where I actually don't want to be hit. So it's kind of like a win-win. It's you ignore them and they sit an objective and they get me points and they're not really costing me anything, or you go after them and then the rest of my army is left more unscathed.
And also don't forget as well, I was just thinking about this and if this ever happened to me, I think I would just fall into the fetal position and cry. And, you get that Plague Bearer unit down and you throw a rally up and you just bring back a whole bunch of models and just make me cry.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but the main course that I really want to get into, because I didn't talk about this a lot, mostly because the War Scroll didn't change a lot, which is why I didn't talk about it, folks. If you're wondering, I probably should have in hindsight. But the thing that people are really unlocking and really liking is the Maggoth Lord option. So you've got Demon Spew, you've got Rot Spawned, and you've got Twice Born. You've got 3 different options. They're all unique, so you can't give them any artifacts. You can't customize them. They are what they are. But when you look at the points value of around 300 points each, they're not all 300. They just feel like they're around 300. What they offer you is incredible value, and they seem to be one of the good damage dealers in your army. Talk to me through a little bit about your thoughts on the 3 and what made you bring in old Demon Spew.
So yeah, each one absolutely has play. I think probably Orgots and Blowab are the 2 that I would consider taking most of the time, and dependent on what else I'm doing in the list. But yeah, Orgots, he's on a 3-up save, which is ludicrous. He's 3-up, 5-up, 14 wounds. So again, if we're talking battle tactics, if my opponent's wanting to do bring it down, well, they've got Orgots, so they've got the Glocken. Enjoy that. Good luck. If you get that, you deserve it. And yeah, really good in combat. He's every game I've had him, he's killed probably 400, 500, 600 points of my opponent's list. He just runs around absolutely wrecking face, especially when combined with the Glottkin's command ability. He's just absolutely flying. Your opponent's oh, I don't want to be in this fight, I'll retreat out, and then he just charges back into them. So it's relentless. The reason I take him in this list is his command point ability, just 1 free command point.
I was just reading that per turn as well. So that's great value. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, what's that? That's probably 100-point ability before we even go into anything else. At least 300 points.
People used to spend 50 points for an extra CP.
Exactly. Yeah. It's crazy. So yeah, getting the Glottkin to auto run 6, giving him +1 to save, +1 to hit. The
bouncing mortal wounds is a nice little ability too. If an unmodified ward roll is 6 you can bounce mortal wounds to a unit within 3 inches. So it doesn't even have to be the unit you're in well, you don't have to be the one that's fighting. If there is a little hero behind the flanks and you are within 3, you could be bouncing mortal wounds to that little hero as well.
Yeah, I had a game against Dragon Spam and he did 10 mortal wounds with bounce back. I almost felt bad if he wasn't running dragons. Just like,
Would you take all 3? I think for me, 2 of the 3 is good.
Yeah.
3 out of 3 might be overkill. Morbidex Twiceborn is situational, but I can definitely see a world where you take Demon Spew and Rot Spawned.
Yeah.
They both work well, but then in your type of build with the Glocken, you quickly run out of points for your troops. So I think that might be overkill if you're taking Glocken. But if you didn't want to take Glocken, you would definitely take 2 of the 3, and I think you would still do quite well.
Yeah, so my non-Glottkin list is both Blowab and Orgots. Yeah, absolutely. So firstly, with Blowab, +1 to cast, -1 for enemies to cast within 14 inches of him. It's like, yeah, it's always good. He's got an aura of, on a 4-up, -1 to hit. Again, if we're combining that with a Lord of Afflictions, turning off commands for their +1 to hit, then you actually, it's one of those rare occasions where you go into Gargants and suddenly that Gargant's hitting on a 5. It's like, cool, like we can stand here all day doing this. And then his spell, any phase that damage is done on a 2-up, they take another D3 mortal wounds, which with Nurgle, where you've got so many ways of doing damage in every turn, even in like the Battle Shock phase with disease points, he's incredible. I quite like running him with what's his name, Epidemius, the guy who gives rerolls. Just then you've got like a +1 to cast wizard with rerolls. It's pretty tasty, especially when the spell is quite good as well.
I'm just looking at Morbidex as well, looking for a situation where I would possibly bring in Morbidex, and I'm kind of struggling. Like, I like the gigantic Nurgling kin, where you, at the end of the Battle Shock phase, you heal half the wounds allocated to it. So if it took 9 wounds this turn, you'd heal 5, which is quite nice. And then if it was going into my turn, I could still use a heroic action and all the other healing abilities. It's got a 3-up save as well. It's tanky, but maybe I think definitely for me, the Demon Spew is definitely the one I would take first. Yeah, and then Rot Spawn would be the second one, and then maybe Twiceborn.
I think if the other 2 didn't exist, you'd probably take Twiceborn most of the time. Like, he's still a really good War Scroll. Like, he's still a very good combat monster. It's just the other 2 are better.
Yes, yeah, I think that's my argument. I think in a world where would I take all 3? Probably not, unless I wasn't taking a Glocken. Would I take 2 of the 3? Yes. Would and then you start ranking them, and I think it's Twiceborn that is at the bottom of the 3, just purely because the other 2 are better. I would agree that Rot Spawn is a wizard, so it brings in some good stuff there. And look at the War Scroll; it has got a slightly worse save, like it's a 4-up, but you get the wizard powers that Demon Spew doesn't bring to the party. The fact as well, like what I love, the little combination of the Demon Spew is a War Master, so you get to issue commands at a further range, and you get the ability to issue a command each turn for free.
Yeah,
I like it.
It's also, I base all of my heroes are generals because the Glotkin's a War Master as well. So basically, if I don't really care if my Lord of Afflictions dies because I'm still getting my CP and I'm getting 2-up extra mortal wound with heroic action. So it's really, really solid having him as a War Master.
Yeah, and I'm being reminded that Blowab has an amazing spell, and
that's the 2-up D3.
It's a whole bunch of mortal wounds.
Yeah.
No, it's good, and I think that's kind of the reaction. Like when I went over the books, like you go through all of the rules, and it's all cool. The allegiance abilities, the changes of the wheel, like all the stuff, right? The disease points, and then you get to the sticker shop right at the end, which is, hey, they're extra points. And I think now that you kind of look at it contextually, realizing the changes through durability, abilities, and things like that, again, I don't think it's so bad. I don't think it's so bad, and I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised And I think what's really cool as well, like someone actually said to me in the comment section once, they're like, oh, now I just need less models to have a 2,000 point army. And I'm like, well, that's nice. That's a good way of looking at it. And I think I made a cheeky comment to someone like, congratulations, everyone. You've now got a 10,000 point army. You've gained a whole bunch of things. I do feel sorry for the people who had lots of Blight Kings and were spamming, and the people had like 60 Plague Bearers and things like that. But I think that's the risk that you play when you play the spam game. And Stormcast players right now with their Fulminators are gonna find this out very quickly. When you play the spam game, the minute that there's a change, you can get punished pretty quickly. But your type of list, which is a mixed force, you've got a whole bunch of good options. You've got some flexibility to respond to the meta as well as how the game kind of changes.
Oh yeah, it's great. I'm looking at getting this. Yeah, buying this as a Christmas present to myself, and it's like I can't believe how cheap it is because everything's it's just Glocken is now the cheapest points for points model in the game, probably in terms of money. It's like cool. It's I think we're still the overwhelming message I've heard is people read the book who've played Nurgle when they've been really down on it, and then they've gone and played some games and they're like, oh, actually, yeah, like this is good, like this is fun, this is competitive.
I think you'll cause your opponents a little bit of a headache. I think they're gonna put everything into your opponent, and they're going to expect you to die, and you're going to just take the punch, and they're going to go, oh, I was expecting to kill you. I was expecting to be able to score this battle tactic easy, and I think that denial is quite actually attractive because, as you mentioned, a lot of really good players can score 4 or 5 out of the 5 battle tactics. But then when through your durability and your healing, you may actually stop them from doing that. And that could be the difference at the end of the game where you've denied a whole bunch of battle tactics. And a lot of tournaments are using battle tactics scored as a secondary measure. So
yeah, I mean, a key example is I had a game against Sprog Allen, who's taken Nighthaunt 5-0, like the best player I know. And yeah, he made 2 very small mistakes in our game. I was able to capitalize through the Glotkin's command ability and something else. And that ultimately won me the game. And I almost never beat him because he's ridiculous. But yeah, like even the very best players will make the odd mistake, and normally they can get away with it. But I think Nurgle really capitalizes on it.
Yeah, and I think the Ground Unclean one does slap now, especially with 15 attacks from the Nurglings, which is why the Legion of the First Prince players are just loving that rule. And I think it's just the sticker shock. And I think, when I looked at the Thrice Fold, like when I initially saw Thrice Fold, I'm like, oh, yes, 3 Ground Unclean ones. Then I realized it was 1,500 points. I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. I think 1 or 2 is enough. I think one is probably enough.
One. Yeah. And even then, you have the debate of for 100 points more, you get to take 2 Maggoth Lords.
Yeah. Thoughts on I mentioned this kind of a little bit earlier, but do you have any thoughts on the Rotbringer coven? Joe's asking around with the endless spells. So you could have some people have talked about, and I think it was Warhammer Weekly or mentioning recently though, you turn 1, you might use a Rotbringer sorcerer to put down the what's it called, the stupid portal. Then turn 2, you might throw through the shackles or some type of endless spell that extends quite far and create those points. And one of the rules that that the Rotbringer sorcerer does is it turns an endless spell into a Maggotkin of Nurgle, so it gives it the keyword, which means for the purpose of disease points, you are going to be able to allocate more disease points earlier by getting into the backfield and extending your range, which is kind of why I mentioned if the Plague Claw catapult could get the Nurgle keyword, it would be a great way to reach out and touch your opponent. Back to the question, what are your thoughts on using things like the Rotbringer Coven with the endless spells to spread the disease points in the backfield?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Something like Shards of Valgahar, I don't know how you say it. Shards again is really nice just because it's 2 endless spells. For me though, I'm normally spreading, by sort of end of turn 2, most of my opponent's army is diseased. Often start of turn 2, we're getting there. So maybe a turn extra of disease for 360 points of Rot Coven plus your end of spells. It's interesting. I think it has play, but I think you'll quickly realize that you can get disease going pretty quickly, pretty early, without the need for the end of spells.
It's getting late and I'm meant to be at work an hour ago. Don't tell work folks. But maybe the final question I've got for you, Alex, before we kind of wrap things up. And Elias asked a really good question. And I think there's probably a lot of people who are feeling the most amount of pain would be our Blight King friends, people who have gone out and spent a lot of money on Blight Kings. Would you have any recommendations or any thoughts with the Blight Kings and how you might use them in the new book?
Yeah, I think they're still really good. They're very, very tanky. They've got a lot of attacks, which means they're going to be getting a lot of disease points. You've got Gutrot Spoom, who can deep strike them, so you can get them somewhere up the board early if that's what you feel like you need to do. But ultimately, we're playing on a smaller board now. If you auto run them that unit 6, so they're going 10, they're going to be sat on that objective turn 1, and then they're going to be in the fight and they're going to be good to go. You definitely don't spam them anymore. I think 2 units of 5 is probably the most I'd like to go, just because you do still need some movement. But yeah, they're super competitive, and I've run them a little bit, and talking to other people who've run them a lot, they are probably still actually worth 250 points. Maybe they're 10 or 20 points overcosted.
Yeah. As the comment said, they were probably a tad overcosted, maybe 230, 240. But in the scheme of things, it's not like they're 50 points over. So, but I appreciate, especially with a whole bunch of things going up, every little point counts. Can you bring an arcane tome onto the Rotbringer Sorcerer? I don't see why you couldn't. It's not a unique character at all. Alex?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you 100% can. But then you're either going high drop with a Warlord, or you're giving up, a 4-up ward on your general or something else. So it's like, yeah, it's definitely, you definitely could if you want to.
In a battle red, you can put a whole bunch of sub commanders in that. So you could always, if you are going to already take a battle, I suppose if you want the extra artifact, you probably want to go Warlord. So
Again, I'm definitely not saying that Rotbringers is bad. I think it's interesting and it needs to be tested. To me, it's not the strongest way Nurgle can play, but I'd also love to be proved wrong because it seems like a really cool way to play the army.
I think there's some good play in it, and I think it definitely needs exploring. I think you got to realize if you go up against, again, a Lumineth build, and you've got, if there's certain armies like Lord of Change, or, there's a couple of really magical, Seraphon, another one, they're very popular in the meta right now, that if you come up against them, one of your key tricks will not be nearly as good, but against everyone else, you'll be having a field day with +3. So if you're going to do it, have something to and make the most of it. And it might be that disease point endless spell shenanigans, or as someone else mentioned, the Rancid Visitation is another good option through Portal.
Yeah, exactly. I think the point is say you take a couple of endless spells, you've suddenly put 500 points, you've put your sub-allegiance, and you've put your artifact selection all into this one thing, which sometimes will do really good things and other times do nothing. And the times it does nothing is my issue, because then, game 5 of a tournament you've done really well, and it does nothing. You're like,
I think, as we wrap up, my closing thoughts, and Alex, I'll let you kind of share as well, but I think my closing thoughts that you have kind of, I'll reinforce what you've said again and again, and that is, I think, having an adaptable plan. There's no longer this one-trick pony. Where you land on the wheel will ultimately depend on how you might want to. Do you go aggressive first? Do you go early? Do you go aggressive late? How do you start thinking about, really adapting to the game, as opposed to turn 1, do this, turn 2, do that, turn 3. It seemed like there was this true tried and tested way that people were playing Nurgle in the past. Actually, and then maybe some closing thoughts. Craig asked a good one. Is there any armies that you wouldn't want to face with Nurgle right now?
I still think Suns is a problem. I just don't know. I've not played the matchup yet, but just having the output to put them down is really tough. Anything that can hit you really hard, really early could be a problem. Nurgle, I feel, plays really well when it gets grinding. If I'm, turn 3 and I'm in there, I think I win pretty much every time. I think the problem can be is if you can't grind your opponent down and they get through you, then that's a problem. But we've got the 5-up ward, we've got all the tricks. Honestly, I think Gargants, maybe Sentinel spam. Some of the S tier filth. Archaon, I don't know if we can kill Archaon.
I was thinking Iron Jaws could be a real bugbear if they go early, and they pin you in your backfield. Is that are you fast enough to then play the objective game if they go hard on you?
Yeah, I mean, you've got the Lord of Afflictions, so you start stuff right in my list. So you start stuff in the
Yeah,
sky.
yeah.
I've got the Plague Bearer screen. Again, being able to switch off their all-out defense means they're just going to be sat there on a 4-up save, which means they're going to die really, really quickly. I played Iron Jaws once, and my opponent, granted his Maw Crusher whiffed a little bit, but it wouldn't have changed anything. He conceded middle of turn 2, just because I'd taken everything off the board. He hit me, didn't do enough. I hit him back, and so yeah. Again, it definitely could be a problem. Like double Maw Crusher could really do work, but I think we're okay.
In saying that, even that, having a Glocken, for example, with the amount of damage you can do, you'd eat those pigs like it was bacon on a Sunday, like those types of things. I guess it depends on the build, right? So thinking about this is important, regardless of what list building and what army we're talking about, is thinking about the meta. Thinking about things like some of the battle tactics and what you can and can't score, and maybe it's time to bring in some Nurgling bases to be able to get into your opponent's backfield if you're not taking the Lord of Afflictions with the Blight Lords. Look at your options and look at what's available to you. And I think you've got the tools. It's just there's no obvious build and there's no obvious list to play.
Yeah, exactly. It's like one of the obvious big bad Seraphon. We've got the mortal wound output to hurt the Bastiladons and lots of 1 damage. So Thunder Lizards isn't actually doing too much to us, and
they're not sniping your heroes. Your ward save, they're not sniping your heroes nearly as easy.
Exactly. So yeah, the top things in the meta are still a problem, but that's because they're a problem. That's nothing. That's no reflection on the Nurgle book. That's a reflection on them. But yeah, I will happily face pretty well anything and have a good chance of coming out.
I love it. Is there any final thoughts, or you want to any shout outs you want to make? I know you're super active in my Discord. I know you're active in a whole bunch of the tabletop simulators and real life tournaments as well. So if you're in the UK, make sure to say hello to Tubb. But any shout outs, anything you want to say before we kind of bring this home and I pretend to be at work?
No, I don't think so. Just it's a really cool, interesting book. Try it out, try different things. I think there's going to be some really cool, wacky builds in there which people haven't even thought of yet. And it's going to take time for us to get discover it. But yeah, it's cool. It's good fun.
Yeah, actually, you know what? It's probably a good shout. It feels a little bit like, I wouldn't say like cities, but it feels like it'll take some time to find the combinations. And I think that's partially some of the excitement. I had some real frustrations with Daughters of Cain because it quickly became one build. It was all about bow stake spam. This one does feel like you've got some tricks all across the board. And I can't wait to see how people start playing around with the coalition units to find some secret spice, whether it is, the tapping into some of the priests or even going into some of the slaves, the darkness keyword shenanigans, whether it's through the marks, what does it look like if you bring in a war shrine? What does it look like if you bring in, does Marauders have marks? Yeah. So what can you do with the Nurgle keyword, not necessarily the Maggotkin keyword. So
yeah.
All right. Alex, thanks for your time. Tubb, you're an absolute legend. I hope you all enjoyed it. And if you have any comments or thoughts or things that you found in the Nurgle book, you know what to deal with at this point. Put it in the comments. Let us know. And hopefully all us Nurgle players, well, not me, but the rest of you, we'll get some hints and trips as you're playing and learning and, test some of that theory out. Something that seemed really good initially, not so good. Something you underestimated is now amazing. Let us all know. Alex, thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who also donated to the show. It's much appreciated. And yeah, all right. Peace out. Thanks for sticking around until the end. I hope you found that video interesting and you walked away with a few new ideas. If you did, I would appreciate it if you hit like on the video, as well as left me a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. The conversation will continue over on Discord, so links down below in the episode description if you want to join the Discord and continue the Age of Sigmar conversation. I want to give a massive shout out as well to these absolute bloody legends, these champions who have continued to support me through Patreon or YouTube members. That is going directly into supporting the maintenance and the growth of this channel. So thank you very much, guys. Much appreciated. And until next time, roll more sixes.